say I don't trust YouTube, so I'm going to refresh until I see we are on a screen, so I don't talk like an idiot for 15 minutes. And believe me, it's happened to me. Well, I talk like an idiot all the time, but I had excuses this time. And then you realize you are not live. So, but yes, we're live now. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, depending on the time you're watching this. We're actually having time trouble here because I am 9 hours ahead of Katie. It's 8 a.m. where she is, near Portland, Oregon, in the US. So first of all, thank you so much, Katie, for doing this early. You're amazing.
To do it.
And second thing, my usual public service announcement of the day. Let me prepare. Wear your fucking mask. Let me repeat. Wear your fucking mask. The mask is not meant to protect you. It's to protect others from you. It can protect you, of course, but that's not the point. The point is we have to protect others. And if we don't, people can die. Your elders, your kids. If anybody tells you the kids cannot get COVID-19, no, they can, and they can die. So please be careful, care for others. Don't be an asshole. And as I always say, if you think you are too important or your freedom is too important, blah, 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 freedom, blah, 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 and you don't care about anybody else because that's what it really means, please leave this channel now. I don't want you here. With that said, hello, Katie. How are you? How's things in your neck of the woods?
I'm doing okay, all things considered. It's been kind of a crazy year, I think for everyone around the whole planet, as far as just the world, current events, and also the comics industry as well. So it's been a little crazy, but I'm glad 2020 is ending, so that feels good.
Yeah, the situation is getting better in terms of COVID and all that. I guess people is happy because Trump is getting out of the way. But aside of that, how is it in terms of COVID and all that?
It's kind of a mixed bag. We've had so many spikes here. I think we're on the third wave is what they're calling it now, and it just seems like some people are trying so hard to be careful. Like I've been so careful, and some people just don't seem to get it. And you see people outside on the street wearing masks and they're wearing them wrong, or they have a mask but their kid doesn't have a mask. Not like a baby, but like a 5-year-old.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, well, it seems like sometimes people are trying but not quite getting it.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. My kid is 6, and of course, she always wears a mask everywhere, everywhere. It makes no sense if you're teaching them. Well, it makes no sense that you wear a mask and tell your kid, no, you don't do it. Like, wait, what? So, and anyway, now, so imagine I am your doctor. My name is Victor Frankenstein. I just changed my name. This is my syringe pop. I just gave you the vaccine. We're all good. We're all fine. You're free. You can do whatever you want. What's the first thing that you've been dying to do for months and you say, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, now I can do it? What could it be?
really I miss visiting family, so that would be high up there. I'm across the country from my family. So that would be probably the first thing. The first thing I would do that's a little easier to do, less expensive to do, would probably be go to the movies. I miss going to the movies. I went all the time, and I saw I don't know how many movies in theaters last year. And it's sad. I miss it a lot. But obviously, it's a very dangerous thing to do sitting inside with a bunch of strangers. So I will wait until it's safe to do it. But yeah, probably that. Probably the movies.
Are movie theaters open there?
In some states they are, but not anywhere that I've been. Like I think the whole West Coast movie theaters are closed. I think a lot of the East Coast too. It may be almost the whole country again now. That's part of the problem is that states are doing all kinds of different things, and so restrictions vary, and then people can freely drive, of course, across state borders. So you have people who are being more restrictive and careful going to places where people are being less, and it's just sort of a recipe for trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. Why of all the chances you had until after finishing college and everything you could do, you said, I want to do comics? It was something that you wanted to do all your life since where you were a kid, because you were reading comics, or you just fell into it.
Sort of a little bit of both. I didn't read comics as a child. My parents weren't really comics readers when they were kids, so I just didn't really grow up around a lot of it. Um, but I read all the time. I loved books when I was a kid. I still do, obviously, but I was a voracious reader, and I just would read as much as I could. When I was in college, I decided I wanted to major in English and try to work in publishing. And I got an internship at Candlewick Press, which is a children's and young adult publisher in the Boston area, which is where I'm from. And they do a lot of graphic novel adaptations. And so I was there as, like a marketing intern, I think was my first thing that I started with. And I just started reading some of the graphic novels they had. And they did a
Hmm.
lot of Shakespeare adaptations. They did a couple of actual Marvel pop-up books. They had a license for Marvel pop-up books. So I read a Spider-Man, an Incredible Hulk, and I think an X-Men pop-up book that they did. And I just really loved the format, and I just really loved all the different art styles. And it was just sort of an exciting new way to experience stories. So from there, I pretty much went to my library and just got everything that had a volume one on it, which doesn't really work. Once you've read enough comics, you kind of realize that volume one doesn't necessarily mean it's the beginning. Um, but it was great. Like I dove into a couple things that just sounded cool when I had no real context to understand them.
Hmm.
The first one that comes to mind for that was Earth X, the old Marvel event by Jim Krueger and Alex Ross, which is incredible. Still one of my favorite comics. And most of I had not read comics for most of those characters before. So there were times where I was a little confused by it, but I've now read it many times since. So I understand it a lot better now. But I loved it even without really understanding parts of it. And so from there, I just kind of realized that that was what I really wanted to do.
Hmm.
Um, and my senior year of college, I got internships at Marvel, and I worked with some great editors there. I got to work on some really amazing comics. It was around the time that Avengers versus X-Men was coming out. That was the big summer event that was going to be happening. So I got to help out on that, which was incredible. And yeah, from there, just kind of kept in touch with people. And, 3 years later, got put in touch with Dark Horse, and they were looking to bring in an assistant editor. They hired me from across the country. I had never been to Portland before, or the West Coast actually, so it was a risk, but it worked out great. And now here I am, and it's been 5.5 years. That was 2015.
Absolutely. Do you miss the East Coast a lot, or you've become a Oregonian?
Well, I love both. I love both. I love Oregon. I love California. I haven't spent as much time in Washington. I'm not dissing Washington. Seattle is great too for Emerald City, is when I've spent time up there. But the East Coast is home. I love Boston. I love New York. I haven't spent as much time down in the South as much. So like Florida, I don't really know well. The rest of the states that are down south, sort of past New York, I really haven't been to most of them. Um, but the Northeast is always going to be home. It's nice to go back, but I feel pretty established where I am now.
And let me ask you this: you get a pitch, you have to read it. What's the first thing that instinctively, I am not even asked, your brain starts tick, 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 no, instinctively, what is the first thing you look for? The emotional parts or the structure?
I would say it's kind of a mix, but maybe leaning more toward the emotional side. The first thing I look for is a really good character. I find that you can put a really fascinating, well-developed character in a kind of mundane, boring setting, um, that's not even a very plot-heavy book, and it can still be a very compelling story.
Mhm.
So character kind of in both ways. I mean, the emotional aspect is sort of the first thing because it's kind of like, does this character make you excited or make you interested? But then also, what are they doing? What is their story? Do they grow over the course of the story? What is it, that's going on?
Mhm. Many people forget or don't know that uh, comics are made by a team of storytellers, and sometimes they cut the editor out of the equation, which is dumb. Let's say it this way: it's dumb because you are storytellers too, and you're part of the storytelling team. So let me ask you a weird question. Well, I always ask weird questions, you know me, but you know what I mean. For you, comics storytelling, is it a symphony, rock and roll, or jazz?
Be all of them. It depends on the comic. I think that it could be any of these. It's an interesting way to talk about it, comparing it to music, actually. I haven't thought of it like that. But I think it just kind of depends on the vibe of the story. I mean, you read some of these the beautiful epic graphic novels. One that comes to mind when I think of it as like a symphony is New York, which is an Olivier Vatine
Mm-hmm.
French bande
Olivier
dessinée
Pena.
originally. We actually did the English version of it, and it was great. It's beautiful, and it feels like this big, epic, futuristic story. I mean, it is, and that feels symphonic to me because the elements and just the art style just really feel like something big and beautiful. And then for rock and roll, I think you get a lot of books that are that as well. I think a lot of the superhero books have that kind of vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And then for jazz, maybe more of some of the subtler graphic novels that we're seeing these days, thinking of the kind of things that particularly like publishers like Fantagraphics and First Second have done really well. These sort of very nuanced stories um, that follow maybe sort of like maybe more what I was talking about, a character who's in not necessarily an extraordinary setting or an
Mm-hmm.
extraordinary circumstance, but it's just an extraordinary story about a person's experience. And that's the best kind of thing I think you can do.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's not against a huge, worlds colliding event, or it's not in this beautiful mythic setting, I think jazz kind of feels right there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess it could be any of them.
I always relate, believe it or not, again because I'm weird. Comics and the comics storytelling to math and music. Because since comics are amazing at giving you feelings, sensations, I think they are much more immediate even than movies and literature because it's just there. The image is just there, and you can use the time and space to manipulate it. But they also need a pace. You can manipulate the pace in a certain way that only I think poetry would be the third leg. Poetry, music, and comics can do. Do you agree on that?
I think is something that's really important to consider, and it's something that I have to keep an eye on a lot, even from a story outline stage, because at that point we're seeing the breakdown of everything that's going to happen in every issue, and maybe a 4-issue series, a 5-issue series, and it needs to be enough that's happening, but you also need to have a sense of how long, how many pages each moment is going to take, and you want certain moments to have, I mean, you want every moment to have the right amount of space, but you
Mm-hmm.
want to make sure that the really important beats get that time. And then even when you're getting into the script with panel breakdowns, and then absolutely by the time you get to the art, you're thinking about it all the time, because sometimes just a really effective silent panel after a character says something or after they see something can
Mm-hmm.
really make that moment land. And people don't always necessarily think about that as pacing, but it absolutely is, because it's making you pause to
Yeah.
reflect on it for just a moment before moving on. And it's really important. So the cadence of comics is something that's very, very cool way that you read them. And that's just something that we're thinking about all the time.
This that you see, you just went ahead before me with a question I wanted to ask, which is something that I know you consider really important, but many people doesn't, which is how important is silence for you in comics? That time to
Yeah.
reflect, as you said.
hmm I like silent beats, and silent not necessarily meaning like no sound effects. You
Yeah.
can put sound effects in there, but not dialogue, not a lot of exposition. Those kind of moments can be really, really impactful. And there's no reason that you can't do that in comics. The art is the primary storytelling mechanism going on there. So, the team is working together. The writer has written panel descriptions, plot descriptions of what the artist is going to then draw. Everyone is still working together, but sometimes just without the dialogue, it becomes just a moment to process everything that you're seeing without getting anything in your head that could cloud it. So there are a lot of times when I get scripts that I'm trimming, suggesting trimming for dialogue to try to give a little more moment, and then just suggesting adding in a beat afterward, a small panel of just a character reacting, where maybe we see someone's face or we're looking over somebody's shoulder at whatever they're seeing, just so that you have a moment to process what they are processing. And it's very immersive that way. I find that it makes you feel much more like you're there in the story.
How important do you think, as a creator, and I will insist on this, guys, a lot, because I keep repeating, people tends to consider that editors are just, technical people. No, they're creators. They are part of the creative team, as I repeat. How important is for you as a creator to know when to tell another creator of the team, hey, you have a middle, you have a beginning, you have a middle, but I need every issue to have a resolution, to have an ending. Even if it is a 4-issue series, even if I don't care if it's short, long, what's the idea? I think you cannot agree with me, of course, and you're the professional. I'm not. That readers deserve resolution in every issue because they pay for $4, $5 per issue. How important is for you to realize that moment and to be back at the career and say, hey, we need a resolution?
Something that I look for as well, because even though you might not figure out whatever the big problem is in the story is not going to be resolved until the last issue, usually. Even with that, you need to be reaching some new point in every single issue, because otherwise, not only does it feel like the story didn't really move ahead in the 20, 22 pages you have, but I think it also makes readers feel like they're not getting as much as they should, considering that comics are expensive. So part of it is also just making sure that readers are getting a good story in every single issue, even when it's 1/4 or 1/5 of the story.
Yeah.
So I look for that all the time. And it doesn't need to be totally resolved, but figuring some new part out that moves the story forward. You can still end on a cliffhanger kind of note, but you need to have figured something out that you didn't know, or gotten to some new point that you weren't at the beginning of the issue. So it's like television in that same way. Like every episode, every issue has to have its own mini story going on, and then they all need to fit into the bigger one. It can be complicated to work through in outlines, and that's when sometimes we'll suggest moving a scene from, the beginning of one issue to the end of the previous issue if we can, or splitting it up, extending something a little bit to take up a little more space and make it more impactful. That's the kind of stuff that we try to sort it out as early as we can, because it becomes a problem if you don't see that until the artist has already inked the issue, and then you can't really do anything about it then. So you have to be vigilant about looking for that early on.
Yeah, and you know that what a big pain it could be to just take the pages and change the order of it so they fit with the idea of the script. So let's better not do it. What
No,
is
the
for you?
only time
Go complete.
I was gonna say the only time we really we never try to, but the only time we really have to make those late changes are usually when it's something that we just realize, like a character's outfit doesn't match up from earlier or something like that, and we'll ask the artist to make a patch for that one panel. We've had a couple times in Hellboy where artists that work digitally, or that sort of finished with like digital inks, will flip panels around, and we've ended up with at least 2 times that Hellboy has had a left hand of doom in print. So we will patch that for the reprints and for the collection. It happens. I mean, that kind of stuff just happens, and you look at it so many times that even I have missed that a couple of times. I'm ashamed to say, but it does happen. It happens to all of us. So if it's something like that, we'll ask for a patch right at the end and try to just get the coloring fixed and get any dialogue, any lettering moved around right before it goes out the door. But we really try to avoid making those late changes if at all possible.
Yes, yes. Hopefully, it's just exceptions to the rule. How important it is for you, if you consider it important? How important is the page turn for you?
It's something that's important. It's something that I consider, but it's not like a must for me, like a page turn reveal. Sometimes it has to be. If it's a really big thing, if a character is coming back from the dead, you're going to want that on a left-hand page. But if it's something that's a smaller reveal, then if it's not working out, like if you can't easily shift some of the weight of the story ahead or after it to make, to shift that page back or forward, then sometimes it's just sort of better letting it be what it is. Because if the pages are drawn well and if they're laid out well, which is something we look for early on, then even a reveal on a right-hand page should still feel like a reveal. And that's something also that you can control with color, because if it's going to be a really big, someone opens the door and there's a big bright light and there's a character there, you don't want that on a right-hand page, because then as soon as you turn, if it's like a dark page before that, your eye is going to go right there anyway. So you have to be thoughtful of it, but it's not something I go crazy on, because I think with smart enough storytelling, it can still work without it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Also, let me ask you this. What is for you the most unique thing that comics have in terms of composition, but especially storytelling?
Well, I mean, comics are so unique. I mean, you think about it, sometimes comics get compared to film and TV because it's visual as well as, dialogue and narration, things like that. But in comics, you have the ability to build any kind of world that you want without
Mm-hmm.
having to worry about things that entertainment, that like TV and film entertainment does, like production costs. You can draw the most incredible world in your comic, and I mean, artists, it'll be a lot more work for them. And some of them draw incredibly detailed stuff, so they maybe need much more time for that. But you can really create absolutely anything, and it will take more time sometimes, but you can put anything that you want on the page there. And the other thing I think that's nice about it is it bridges that gap between reading a prose book and watching a movie, where you get to imagine parts of the story for yourself. You're not hearing everything exactly as it is. You're not quite going after, or I should say, following a certain actor's portrayal. If you don't like the sound of an actor's voice in a movie for a character, sometimes it can take you out of it. But in comics, your brain will fill that in for you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it kind of creates a nice in between where it's a little bit of your own world because it's your head filling it in for you, but still a lot of what's being shown to you. And it's really nice to see the world in front of you. I love reading prose. I will always love reading prose books, but comics are just really magical in that way.
Yeah, and there's
I don't know
another
if
part.
that fully answered the question.
No, absolutely does. But
Okay.
to add to that, there's another part that I love about comics, and I want to know if you agree. Is that movies and movies, TV shows, and novels in general, they are linear. They tend to be linear, and you, as a reader or viewer for any movie, you tend to be a passive spectator. Things happen in front of you. But in terms of comics, I think that's the most. This is the maybe I could have theater, but I think comics is the part that needs the reader to be more active and to get his own or her own conclusions. I've heard from many creators that like 30 years later, and it happened to me with J.M. DeMatteis, last week. Somebody was talking about an issue and giving him an interpretation, and he said, "It's the first time in 30 years I've ever heard that this issue interpreted that way." And this is what I love about comics. So comics are really up there in that sense, right? Because they always leave it open for the reader to fill in the gaps.
I agree.
And also, what was the other side that I wanted to say about this? Um, how much do you like to be non-linear in your storytelling, which is something that I always so love about comics, that you can jump back and forth and manipulate time and it feels just natural because this is what we do. Do you prefer stories that are linear, prefer stories that where you can play with time and space, or it doesn't matter and it's the same to you?
I think that both work for different stories better. Being able to jump around with flashback sequences and making them look so clearly like they're in a different time so that there's no question and no confusion. Being able to do that, being able to jump to the future as well, and then just to different settings so quickly. Just it doesn't even have to be on the next page. I think you can just sort of go in the next row of panels and be in a different scene, and it can work, and it can work very seamlessly with the
Mm-hmm.
right artist. You can do any of that very easily. I mean, they can do any of that very easily, I should say. I don't do it, they get the credit for that. but
Mm-hmm.
um but it's absolutely possible, and it is unique and special for comics to be able to do that. I think sometimes the linear stories can feel really great too, because following something just sort of straight through, I think with so much TV and film today, there are a lot of flashbacks where we sort of see the resolution and then go back to see how it all played out. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that can absolutely be the best way to tell a lot of stories. But it's also cool and then ends up feeling unique to actually just see something happening from beginning to end sometimes. And you get to play around with seeing different characters' perspectives on it as well. Because sometimes the big sort of reveal that comes out is just people having a completely different understanding of a situation, which is the simplest way to put things, like the big Civil War type events that happen in
Mm-hmm.
comics.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's cool to play with both. I like both.
Okay. Do you work with this? I have to ask this because you work with an artist like Mike. If you don't know, she's the editor of all the Mignola verse. Sorry for using that term, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
So,
it's a,
how important it is? I think it is for you and for comics, and you'll understand what I mean. Why I mention Mike here. It's how important is pattern recognition for you. And with that pattern recognition, let
mhm.
me. I think you know what I mean, but in case somebody doesn't, you know, caveman macho. Nice to meet you. I am in the caves, and like 3,000 years ago, a bush there rustles, and I jump and run away because there's an animal there, probably is going to kill me. You know, that's how important it is for you in comics storytelling to recognize and to tell an artist you don't need to feel everything. You know, just leave enough space for the reader to interpret because our brain is going to complete it, and that's something that Mike's is the sorry for my language is the fucking master of it. You know, you don't need, you know, everything he puts in there is precisely what you need for your mind to complete it. And you've worked with Jeff Darrow, which is exactly the opposite.
Yes, you see everything, every detail of everything.
So
I think, yeah. Sorry, go ahead, finish.
no, I was just going to say. So, do you feel sometimes that as part of comics, Jeff Darrow aside, Jeff's genius aside, sometimes the artist should understand horror backway is a bad idea, and they should just leave the reader some space.
That's something that's important, and it's similar actually, I think, to having silent panels like we were talking about just a few
Yeah.
minutes ago. Just having a panel or a sequence where you're really focusing on just the essentials, like the reader will understand. Like, and that's one thing sometimes that I feel like with newer artists you see is people putting in every single detail, putting every single character in every panel to try to make it so you understand where everyone is all the time. And that's something that even in TV and movies isn't really the case. Like, if you see everyone together at the beginning and then every now and then you see a panel with everybody there, the reader will follow the spatial relationship there. And you don't need to see people take every step. Sorry, my computer was just trying to do some updates, but I got
No
out of
worry.
that. Not the time. Um,
No.
but I think that less it can be more a lot of the time. And it's funny you talk about Mike doing that, because obviously that is more and more, you look back from the early Hellboy comics getting to the later ones, and he just shows less every time. And he's even joked before about how he hasn't drawn Hellboy's feet in years because he always has him standing in fog, and it works. But like, you can tell that it's fog. If you needed to see what was in the background, Mike would draw it. So if it's not there, you're fine. You don't need it. It's just probably more hell pandemonium buildings back there. That's not what you need to focus on right now. What you need to focus on is Hellboy, very small, in this big panel where it's probably very light and foggy at the bottom with beautiful Dave Stewart palettes. And then it's very dark in the background, and maybe you see one tiny little tower back there, and that's it. It's about Hellboy, and it's about the tower, and it's about the distance between them, and the fact that he's going there. Just something sort of like that. I think less is more is something that really works, particularly in comics like Hellboy and Hell, when you have a character who's sort of at the end of their big journey and they're going in to do the final big thing they need to do. Having that focus really be on them, I think, is one of the best storytelling things you can do, because it's their story at that point. You need to bring it back to what's important. There's been so much that happens in these very long stories, and at the end you want to make sure that you're always focusing on just the most critical parts again, and not getting the reader distracted with other details that you maybe don't need so much. And it's nice too, you don't have to draw feet if you don't want to.
Yeah, from Mike's perspective. Well, it works for him, so that's and as I said,
it does.
He's the best at doing that, so no criticism. More, you have to say, as most artists in this industry does. I don't know how he does it. I would love to be able to do that, but only Mike is able to. That's why he's a genius. Let's say it that way.
Doing so much with so little.
Yeah, exactly. Less is more. I agree with that in comics, but also that helps. And let me know if you agree or not. When you are that minimalistic in a way, you always know where to point the reader's eye to, right? Mike wants you to look at Mike or any other artist. I'm using Mike as an example here, but I could talk about many others. It's minimal. Everything that should be there is there. You show just what you need to show, but you're telling, since it's not clogged, it's not filled with detail, the reader's eye is always going to go where you want, right?
You're able to sort of make sure that the story is told very clearly the way that you intend it, and there's going to be no distraction. And it is really sometimes, especially over the course of a page layout, just about how your eye gets pulled down the page. And you see that with some of the more interesting sort of splash pages that people do. And sometimes they're kind of, I think of them as splash pages, but sometimes it's those kind of compositions where people will have sort of diagonal panels going down, like back and forth, and then it'll be maybe captions that sort of snake down with them. But it really helps you get pulled into it as well, because you're following it down and you feel like you're just, in a ride at Disneyland, getting pulled from one room to the next in a dark ride, seeing the next bit of the story, and you're just like, oh, this is a big reveal about what's happening here. It's you see that in a lot of the older Marvel events, I think, where you have the Watcher or somebody revealing a bunch of what has happened for all of history. And it's so much fun. It's so much fun to see those, because you do kind of feel like you're getting taken on a ride.
Yeah, but I gotta be honest, what I don't like is, when you see a double page splash, and then after you see all that, like, oh my God, from left to right, and then below you have like 7 panels that cross from one page to the other. So you have to read the splash and then go below, go to the top, to the bottom, and read all of that again. So I like, wait a minute, it doesn't flow. You know what I mean? If you do it like that, go, please.
I was just say, sometimes with that, it almost feels like the little panels around the bottom would work better as their own page. I wonder sometimes with those if it's just that they didn't have the space to do it on a separate page, so they just did the best with what they could, which is what has to happen sometimes.
Yeah.
But I see what you mean. It pulls the eye back and forth in a bad way.
Yeah, because it doesn't flow. If you do it like J.H. and Alan Moore did it in Promethea, as you said, the snake shapes and all that, and your eye flows with it, and you're on a ride, you're on an adventure, because they are taking you places, to say it that way. For me, just special. But when you're forced to, and then whoop, let's go back, let's go down. It's your eyes are always going to try to go upper left to bottom right for us, Westerners. For of course, not the same for Eastern people, but it when it goes, I also always say against eye, how painful it is for you as an editor to see something that goes against eye and against the motion that it should follow on a page. You're like, oh my god, no, not this.
I will say when it's books that I'm working on, I try to prevent any issues with that as much as possible. Sometimes it is just what ends up needing to happen for page space. Um, so, we just try to make it as clear and as smooth as possible. And sometimes you get the sense that in comics that doesn't it feels like it didn't get noticed until the lettering stage, because
Mhm.
the lettering's kind of blocking art that you think is probably important behind these big captions. And these kind of pages are often captions, because you're getting a big explanation of some huge event. So when it's being only caught at the lettering stage, that's really too late at that point. All you can do is trim text. But if it's a lot of exposition, you have to be careful about what you're trimming, because you do need that information to be there. And if the art is already drawn, you can't really go back and show more than you're telling without delaying the issue.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just the kind of thing that I try to be mindful of early as well. That's the tough thing. It's like try to catch as much as possible, as early as possible, 100% of the time. And in a perfect world, you can. But the world isn't perfect, so sometimes we just have to work around what we see. And occasionally, something will need to change in the story a little bit later. We'll decide to tweak a line because of wanting to just sort of change the information, particularly with books that are part of a big existing lore, part of a big universe. Just sort of realizing like, well, we don't maybe want to address this too much here
Mm-hmm.
because we don't want to give too much of that away. Or sometimes it's the opposite. It's like, can we add in a line about this one random character that is going to show up later on in the last issue? And so we can sort of fit things together in a puzzle that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, those kinds of late changes, we try to avoid them, but occasionally they happen and we just do
Yeah,
the best we can.
yeah, it just happens. You cannot avoid with the time constraints you guys have and the deadlines and publishing dates and previous dates. You can't avoid it all the times. That's impossible.
All the very many dates. And that's the other thing, is just keeping in mind all of the schedules all the time.
Mhm. Yes, yes, yes. I hope your assistant is ready to work on that a lot.
I work with a great assistant editor, Jenny. She and I make a great team, and between the two of us, I think we pretty much have everyone's schedule almost memorized. But it's so much to keep track of, and that's a really big important quality that you have to have as an editor, is that organizational
Mhm.
aspect of it, because there's the fun creative part, and when you're talking through outlines and looking at art and helping people make choices with coloring and lettering and all of that, that's the really fun creative aspect. And then there's the very technical administrative project management aspect, which is actually getting the book made and off to the printer and solicited and on sale. So working with every single department to hit so many deadlines for every individual comic, it's a lot. So you really have to be able to balance the two, and you really have to have a good organizational skill set to handle it.
Yes, and then it's checking the invoice and to get people paid. That's also a big part of it.
Very important part, because you definitely want to make sure you're getting everyone paid on time. And you always want to be sympathetic to the fact that for the most part you're working with freelancers who, it's always sort of more uncertain for them, so you just want to be as on top of it as possible for everything that they
Mhm.
need.
Mhm. Uh, do you think as a medium or media, sorry, as a media, comics have any limits?
Mm, well, so I guess there's kind of one. Well, it's not exactly as a medium so much as it's just as a as a product. Part of the issue I think with comics right now is the way that they're sold and discovered by people. But I don't know if that quite answers the question. But what I mean is just that so many more people are reading comics and graphic novels than ever before. So many more kids are, which is fantastic. And a lot of the newer readers are coming in from the book market side. They're buying books on Amazon, they're browsing at their local bookstores. Maybe they are going to a comic shop, but a lot of times they're going to a bookstore. Maybe they don't have a comic shop close to them, or maybe they've just never been to one before. They don't know where one would be. So it can be interesting to try to decide when we're putting a pitch into our costing committee to decide to approve a book and publish a book, whether or not to publish it as single issues or go straight to the trade or hardcover with it, because a lot of that is just sort of pinpointing which audience they think it might hit more with. And depending on the creators that are attached, if they think it will do as well through Diamond as it would just going straight to the book market, basically, and into Diamond as well in that case. But I think that's one of the things that's hard for the industry, and we're adjusting. I think everyone is sort of adjusting and doing more and more as graphic novels now. Um, but you don't want to lose comics because the floppy issues are so much fun, and that's the original. We want to have that. Um, but I think that's part of the problem, and one of the limits we're seeing now is that the individual comic issues are getting more expensive. Every couple of years they go up 50 cents or $1. Some of the special events that have, the heavier cover stock and are maybe a double length issue can be almost $10 for some of the publishers. It's a lot. And if you're spending $4 or more on an issue every month, it adds up. So people will wait to buy the collection instead, which I totally understand because it ends up being less expensive a lot of the time. And sometimes you get bonus material. So I think just one of the limits that comics is having right now is figuring out how to continue to sell comics. Not so much the medium itself, but just keeping the industry alive. And I think there are a lot of people with really great ideas on ways to do that. And I think one of the best things that publishers are doing is trying to publish creators who are coming from all different kinds of backgrounds, diversity as far as like people of different races, genders,
Yes.
sexual orientations, all of that, but also people who just have different kinds of life experience, people who come from prose publishing, people who come from entertainment, someone who has had background working in, like you have like a Tom King, right? Was like a CIA, was he in the CIA, I think? And then he
Yes.
comes in and writes these sort of books that are influenced by that. And it's just interesting to see people coming in with different kinds of life experience and different kinds of background and the stories they can tell with that. And that's not to say anything negative about all of the creators that have been in the industry for so long, but it can really help to bring in new readers as well and help the medium grow, because I think people really do love comics and graphic novels once they try them for the first time. But, and like I said, I didn't really get into them until I think I was 19 when I had that internship. So people can discover them later in life and absolutely love them, but it's just sort of finding a way to get it into people's hands
Yeah,
that
but it's
maybe
also,
would not have picked it up before.
yeah, as you just said, that brings to my mind something that I used to tell people when they tell me about the diamond numbers. And I always go back to, no, that, sorry if you hate me for saying this, I'm going to say it anyway. Ghetto numbers as compared to the real world. Because for me, the real numbers is the book scan, it's not the diamond charts. You know what I mean? I see Reina Tegelmayer selling 1 million copies or Dogman selling 1 million copies. And that's why I say, there's readers there. There's readers there. They are out there. They're waiting for you. If you consider in a 350 million, more or less, country that's selling 60, 70,000 is a huge success, there is a problem there. So
it's just, they're out there.
so go ahead,
I was
please.
just gonna say, so yeah, the readers are all out there. And then the tough thing too is also making sure that, we're still, as much as as much as any of us can, helping to keep the comic format alive
Absolutely.
too at the same time. And like I know a lot of people have their local comic shops that they grew up going to, and then maybe you move, you find a new one, it feels like home. Portland has so many comic shops. It feels like a lot to me anyway. It's wonderful and it's great, and there can be very much a community aspect around that. And some of the newer shops in particular that have popped up, but also some of the older shops that are just sort of hosting a lot more events, not in the pandemic, but in life before all of that, people trying to engage with readers and with customers a lot more. In Portland, it's really easy to have industry events because so many comics people live in Portland. So it's really sometimes about engagement too, and it helps the retailers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we don't want to see comic shops close. That's always
Absolutely
heartbreaking.
not. Absolutely not. If it sounded like
Yeah.
a man that no, no. I was just meaning we have that market. Let's keep that market, as you said, floppies,
Mhm.
monthlies, whatever you want to call them. They're there for a reason. There's an audience for that, and hopefully it'll keep growing. But it's clear there's a limit to that audience growth, and there's a lot of readers that are out of that market or community. So what I'm saying, and you were amazing saying that before, talking about kids reading comics. We gotta go for that audience, and if it's not in the comics market, in the comic shops market, we gotta reach out to them. Female readership. I always go with the numbers for manga in BookScan, and I always say this is a model.
I mean, that's the majority of it anyway. And something that we've seen this year, I think pretty much everyone has, with just everything that happened, with everyone's books getting paused for a while, Diamond closing for a little bit because of, the restrictions and everything that happened in their state, just everything sort of pausing for a while. People continued to buy books like Amazon and other, bookshop.com popped up here, which is a website for anyone who doesn't know that allows you to buy books from small bookstores. And so you're supporting smaller businesses that way. So that sort of popped up this year as well and has become extremely popular. And people have still bought a lot of books this year. And a lot of older titles have been selling very well. And I mean, there was a delay with things coming out for a while. So part of it is just wasn't as much new material, but also people just sort of had a little more time, some people, to read. So it was, I think as far as book sales, it's been kind of an okay year, surprisingly, because people are still wanting to buy books and to read the books.
I
So
don't know if
this year more than everything.
yeah, I don't know if it's the same in the US that is in Spain, but in Spain the numbers actually have gone up from 2019. People that had lost the the reading books often or reading comics often, of course being home, they went back and read more and more, and they are not stopping. So the numbers by the end of the year, as you said, surprisingly, are going up. Do you notice that in the US too?
Been at least we sort of like I'll see numbers, not just like for us, but for
Yeah,
the industry and also just for publishing, sort of month by month. And some of the months have been higher than the same time last year. And it's interesting to see it, and it's good. It's also just good to see people reading.
yeah,
Because I
of
think a
course.
lot of people, myself as well, want to read for fun more than we get to. So maybe one of the tiny upsides of this year, if there even is one, is that people have gotten a chance to do some
Mhm.
more of the things that they've wanted to, including reading. Um, would rather have had a normal year, I think, pretty much
Oh yeah,
everyone.
oh
But
yeah.
but it's been interesting to see, and yeah, I think there have definitely been some months where book sales have been up from last year,
Mhm.
which has
Well,
been interesting.
but let's just try to be possible, my dear. If one of the positive things we get out of this is people reading more and reading again, and some people who never read is starting to read or getting their kids to read because they were at home a lot of the time, let's be positive. No, give me that small small thing at least.
Tiny little thing.
So, as a creative, have you ever thought about writing yourself?
I mean, I don't know that I would. I enjoy writing, but I think that it would be I think I would be too self-critical if I was to write a comic. And I don't think I would like anything at all that I came up with. um, it's tough. I mean, there are plenty of editors who write, but I don't know. I haven't really ever thought about it too seriously.
Uh-huh.
But I guess never say never. I don't think anytime soon though.
No. Don't say never say never, because then in 10 years I could be like, watch this video. You said never. So
It happens. And then, yeah, you tag me on Twitter with this exact moment where I'm saying no. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I really like to work with people on their stories. And I really enjoy approaching stories from the reader's perspective. So, and it's never exactly from the reader's perspective, but as someone who gets to read the outlines and read the scripts and sort of process the story that way, that's more what I prefer to do.
yeah.
And that's what I love
And
to do. Yeah.
and you just mentioned the word reader. So what are you reading right now?
Oh gosh, well, this has been a year where I've bought a lot of books and I have not really gotten to dig into as many of them as I would like. So lately, like, I'm trying to think, I've been catching up with some of the other Dark Horse stuff that I don't work on. This is one of the things that I sometimes wonder is the case at other publishers too or not. But we all of the editors work very independently. We're doing the same basic work, but just on our own titles. So we're not really working, aside from, the higher editors working with the more junior editors, we don't really work with each other too much. Not a lot of crossover events or anything like that. And particularly for us, because so much of what we do is creator owned or licensed, we don't need to coordinate with each other on any characters. No one needs to wander into the Spider-Man office and ask if they can put him in the background in an X-Men book, if that works with what's planned for him at the moment. So sometimes it's just kind of like I try to take a moment to go back and look at some of the other Dark Horse stuff that we've done lately. And I've been catching up on some of the licensed stuff that we've done.
Hmm.
Um, the Cuphead anthology was what I was most recently reading. And
Hmm.
I haven't played the game, but the art is beautiful and the stories are so clever. And so I was having a really good time going through it. It's a bunch of little short stories and the art is just incredible.
Hmm.
So that was what I was reading yesterday.
And non-comics, what are you reading?
I'm trying to think of the last prose book I read. It was a little while ago now because work has kind of ramped up for me lately. So I've been reading a lot of comic scripts lately. Um, the last prose book I read was let's see, it was a horror novel. I'm blanking on the title. The Elementals,
Hmm. Hmm.
by McDowell. Is his last name? I'm blanking on his first name. It's a Southern Gothic horror novel
Hmm.
about a family who has this sort of estate of land in coastal Alabama,
Hmm.
and they go there, and there is some very interesting kind of ghosts and hauntings going on there. That's the kind of thing that I gravitate toward in prose is I'm very setting oriented. So at that time, I was looking for specifically a southern feeling horror novel or a gothic novel. Um, so that's how I ended up there. It had been on my list for a while, but I actually finally got to it. I have a long list of things to read, and that was the one that I got to most recently. So that was good. I finished that November
Uh-huh.
sometime.
And being a northeastern woman, American, and loving horror, as you just said, are you a fan of Stephen King's?
A lot of his stuff. I've read quite a few of his books, and I've liked pretty much everything that I've read. I think Salem's Lot is my favorite. I read that once a while ago, and I've been meaning to reread it. I reread things a lot as well. um, but I love The Shining. I also love the movie version of The Shining, although it is so different.
Yes,
I love The Shining.
famously,
Yeah.
Stephen King hates it.
Yep. So much so that he made his own version, which I have not seen,
No,
but
don't.
but
I don't like
that's
The
what people
Shining.
say.
I don't like the movie The Shining. I honestly don't. Uh,
Hmm.
but I watched his version, and then I was like, okay, that I don't like the Kubrick version, but at least it's a movie. This is not a movie. It is really, really bad.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. I do like Stephen King. He has so many books that he's read, and I'd like to read more of it. It's interesting because they are set in New England so much, Maine mostly, but it's nice and it's kind of creepy sometimes to see movies and read books that are set in your home, but
That's
it's fun.
that's
I
why
like
I
that.
that's why I ask about the Stephen King in
Yeah.
specifically because it's your neck of the woods. So I was saying, if it feels weird to read it, and you love like, oh, this is not real, but it's actually where I'm from, so it's gotta feel special, right?
There's so much horror that's set all around New England, and I grew up right next door to Salem of the witch trials history fame. So I was born there actually. So born in the witch city, and it's cool. Like it's great, and they definitely the city has a lot of tourism based around that, so people are very interested in it. But it's also really interesting to read a lot of the books about local history. Some of them being like a fictional historical fiction story about it, uh, which is interesting sometimes when people get things wrong about the town or the city, and then also just reading nonfiction books about it. I've been trying to read more nonfiction as well. Because I find that I'm kind of missing school, like college, a little bit. So it's nice to read a nonfiction book and sort of learn something in depth about a new topic.
Mhm.
But the the problem is just I buy all of these books and they sit in a stack. And then when I get the time to read them, I do. But I don't get as much time as I would like to,
Yes.
even in the pandemic, it turns out.
No, people think that since there's a pandemic, it's easier. But be honest, how much have you overworked because of being every day, you know, locked at home?
Well, I mean, it's tough. Honestly, probably a lot. It's it's interesting because like when you're working from home, you can sort of break up your day a little more. Like it's easier to pause between tasks and go, throw a load of laundry in
No,
or
it's
something like
not.
that.
No, it's not. Don't
Or
lie. You are
it's
in
not,
my
I
world
mean,
now. This is 22 years of my life. And it's not easier. Just sometimes forget even about having lunch because you're focused on something.
that is true. I do find that the lines are kind of blurred. Like I will check email much earlier in the day than I normally would otherwise, and also much later in the day. And I will continue working even after dinner, which in the past I've done, but now it's kind of like, okay, I try to do all of the email type work during the day when everyone else for the most part is on email. And then I could actually look at some art or read a script in the late afternoon and then in the evening, and I can actually focus on it more then. It's always kind of different with working with freelancers anyway because people make their own hours, and then working with creators who are all around the world because people are in totally different time zones. So there can be work at any time. Which is a little scary sometimes because there's always something looming. But it's it's just sort of one of the reasons also why I try to keep an eye on email a little bit in the off hours is because of the creator who's based in, the UK has a quick question about something that's really easy for me to answer, and then it allows them to continue doing what they need to do. I'm just going to answer it because it makes life easier for them. But I try to sort of get in, check email to keep an eye on it, and then get out and not just scroll through and find myself doing a million extra tasks.
Yeah,
It's
well,
just it's just a different
the
world.
operative word is try.
Yes, it's a lot of intention. It doesn't always work out.
There you go. For you, looking at comics, trying to look at comics from your heart and soul, from your guts, but also I'm going to make it really difficult, I know, but also as a global perspective. What direction do you think we should take as an industry to grow in the directions we said before? In the comics market, yes, but also in the general. I'm sorry to say this, but it's not an insult to anybody. I'm sorry, I promise. To the general audience, if you know what I mean. Where should we go? What should we try to do?
I mean, that is a big question. I certainly think that focusing on the book market, not in, like we were saying earlier, not in any way to sort of let the direct market and all the comic shops fall by the wayside, not at all, but just to sort of plan extra time even for books for the book market can make a big difference. Something I think a lot of people don't realize if you don't work in publishing, which you wouldn't, and I don't know anything about the majority of other industries, so I don't expect people to know any scheduling type information about publishing.
Of
But
course.
for a traditional publisher and for a book that's going to go into bookstores and on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all of these different stores, you like for us, we work with Penguin Random House for our distribution. A lot of other comic book publishers do as well for their book market distribution. And for all of those big traditional publishers, you need to have things like your solicitation text and your cover mock-up done at least a year in advance. And for comics, we get a comic approved, we start working on it as soon as the creative team is available. We build out a schedule based on how long it will take all of them to do their work, add in time for colors and letters, coordinate that, add in a little extra time for drama, coordinate that, add in just production time. A comic only needs to go to the printer a month before it goes on sale. So you sort of plan all of that out, see when the last issue can go, and then work backwards to figure out when number one can release so that you're releasing as soon as possible. But then with the book market, you don't want to release as soon as possible because you want to make sure that there's time for all of the buyers at these big stores to look at your book, get acquainted with what it's about, figure out things like BISAC codes, which is going to determine where it will be shelved in these stores and how it will be, categorized in these big websites so that people who are browsing will find it, and so that the people who will be most interested in this book will find it. All of that takes a lot of time to do. And with comics, with monthlies, we're usually just trying to put them out as soon as they're done. And then typically we would put out the collection, in the pre-pandemic times, 4 or 5 months usually would be the soonest we would do it after the last issue goes on sale. And that usually is not even enough time after we started working on it for Penguin Random House to have the information they need to really position the book well to sell as well as possible. And so planning much longer schedules is something that on our end we're trying to do. And because of how much things got paused this year, like we actually, when Diamond shut down, we paused work on a lot of books, not everything, but a lot. And then when we started working again, which is 2 to 3 months later on most of those, we didn't, with very few exceptions, we didn't put anything on sale until September because we wanted to resolicit those books, which made things easier for us and easier for retailers to be able to finalize their orders again. So we did that. So there was almost nothing Dark Horse that came out this past summer. And then we sort of were like, okay, so we're going to push all of the new stuff that was supposed to come out this year to 2021. And now there's going to be like a new Hellboy book of some kind or another, or a new Mike Mignola book comic, I should say, coming out almost every month next year. Like, I think we have a debut almost every single month. Don't have one in January, but February through December, there will be a number one or a one shot with his name on it. So everything just sort of slid back, but it's actually made stuff better for the book market team, who likes to have as much information as possible when they're going to their contacts at the traditional publishing house, because it just makes it easier for them to do their job, which helps the books sell better. So now we're looking at just having longer schedules for everything, which means more wait time before books come out, but it's better for the books. And so I think planning titles with that in mind doesn't necessarily have a negative effect on the direct market, but can have a very positive one on the book market. So I think that's something that, hopefully we can continue to do that will help the industry and will help sales.
Because people doesn't realize how important shelf space is, right? Shelf space, I mean, not only
Yes.
the position, but to have the time to inform all the parts involved, which are not one or two, a lot. And
Yes.
How to position the book, give them the right information, get it to the people who has to move that information, the contact who has to sell it to that bookstore here or there. And also, more and more, I think you'll agree with me, how important the internet shelf space is too, right? It's not only the store one.
It's like when we are writing the marketing copy for our books, we have to try to make sure to have as many good buzzwords in the first 25 or 30 words as possible, because when you're scrolling through a website like Amazon, for example, on your phone, you're scrolling through it, you're seeing a shortened version of all that copy, usually only up to 25 words. So you have to catch people's attention who are shopping on their phones and put as much punch as you can into those 20 or so words. And just doing things like that, which is something we as editors write that copy. And so, that's something that we can all do to try to help our books as much as possible.
I always make
little details.
No, I always make a joke about how in the old days, when people were making jokes about the pow, sap, bang, I always said, that was because of space. They were like, what? No, that was because of space. They had to use big, fun, exploding words in a way, because that's what caught people's attention.
Yep, that's a lot of what it is.
Yeah. Oh, let's go with some questions here.
That's something.
Go, please.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No, please continue. I don't want to interrupt you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was just finishing. I was just saying that's one of the probably many things we can do to try to help the industry going forward, is just try to give as much scheduling time as possible to the book market to help them as much as possible, which gets all of our books better numbers, which gets more books made. So
yes. If they sell more, they produce more, guys. So give them more time to sell to the real world, as I always say, and they will keep doing more books for the comics world. That's how it works. It's not one against the other. It's one helps the other.
It's hard. Yeah, and it's hard to explain sometimes to creators who are excited. People want their book to be on sale, and I don't blame them. You want to see that book, you want to hold that book as soon as possible. And it can seem like it's so far ahead, but then even now, like, we'll be thinking about like, okay, we should plan this next collection for this. We have so many things planned for next year, and we need to have the cover done, which hasn't even been started. So, okay, we can put it on sale. Like right now, I was just planning a book that's going to go on sale spring of 2022, which means we need to have the cover done by February. Ideally, it would be done now, but February is our cutoff to go on sale between February and May of not this coming year, but the year after that. And we have like working schedules going on for books that'll be on in 2023, 2024. So some of it is very far ahead. Very far ahead. It's a little daunting sometimes to look at the schedules and be like, well, I guess I have a pretty long to-do list.
But there's a reason, as you said, you're planning for a better future, and a better future means if we work that way, you give a lot more times to the other players, which is not the creative part, but are the guys who are gonna sell it. And the guys who are gonna make it for the readers. Shut up, Shiri. For the readers to be able to read it, right? That's the reason behind it. And this is what people should understand. We do it for you guys. It's not we make you wait because we want. No, we make you wait because that's the way you're gonna get it. I can hear you.
Start at the.
Okay, now I can hear you now. For a second, you were like.
So you wanted to start on some of the questions?
Yes. I was telling you that for a second I didn't hear you. I just heard, static, but it's fine now. Okay, so Pedro Mercader has a lot of questions, I see. Hello, everyone. I was wondering how it was planned, the Hellboy B.R.P.D. grand finale. In some ways, for me, I got the sense of a more fulfilling ending than the one we got in Hellboy in Hell.
Ended 29 with the dates, but yes.
Start again. This you maybe it's the battery on your.
How was that?
Speak now, please. Can you speak now? Can you hear me?
No.
Now I can hear you. Now I hear you.
Now you can hear me?
Yes, now I hear you. Speak now, please. Say something.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
This was really weird.
Right,
It was like your battery was dying or something like that.
I can't hear you now.
You can hear me? Hello. Can you hear me?
Anything?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, hear you. You can hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, so please go.
Okay. I think the battery is dying. I can hear you only in one of them. No.
It's some seconds it comes, some seconds it goes. Speak now. I'm hearing the noise in your computer, so.
Okay. It's very staticky. I can hear you a little. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. No problem.
Okay. I cannot hear you well at all. I'm sorry to say. I don't know what is going on.
Maybe you just need to charge the AirPods for 5 minutes. I don't know if it's that.
Okay. Anything? No.
Guys, just a little patience. I think we have a problem with the charge of her AirPods. So
Can you hear me now?
Nope. I don't hear you. Nope.
Okay.
Let me type it in our private chat. I don't hear you. We're trying to see if we can fix this, so please bear with us. As you can see, there's a problem. I don't know if it's the AirPods. I don't know what it is. En castellano no sé si son los AirPods que se le han quedado sin carga o un problema del ordenador, de la batería. No sé qué ha pasado, pero de repente ha ido de estática a no irse. Static from not hearing, so probably it was that. If you have any questions that I can answer myself while we wait, if tenéis alguna pregunta que yo pueda contestar. Dios mío, qué barba tengo, me acabo de dar cuenta. Mientras ella vuelve, decídmelo. Hello?
Can you hear me? I don't know what's happening.
Let me see. Let me try one thing. Speak now? Can you speak now? I'm trying to see if I can hear you in YouTube, and it's only a restream thing. You can hear me? Just say yes or no. Can you hear me? Let me get out and come back myself. Hello. Nothing. So, people, it seems this is not going to work. Katie has been trying, and trying. We'll continue some other day with your questions. Thank you so much for being here. Katie, thank you. Let me tell you here what I'm saying. Thank you so much. Don't worry. We'll finish another day. So, Katie says, thank you for having me on. I will get new earbuds and I will be on another time to answer your questions. So we're out. Thank you all. We'll be back tomorrow. And stay safe. Don't be an asshole. Wear your mask. Out in 3, 2, 1.